Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, namaste, jumbo. Bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville, in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted and so honored that you would join us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher Radio, wherever you get your podcasts. And please tell your family and friends, your kids, teachers, and principals and librarians all about the show. Our guest today is Jen Calanita. She's here to celebrate her middle grade novel. It's called 12 to 22. Before we invite Jen into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by The Visitors, a thrilling middle grade novel by Greg Howard. The spirit of a 12-year-old boy spends his days stuck at the deserted Hollow Pines plantation in the South Carolina Low Country with no recollection of his day, no recollection of how long he's been there, and no idea how to leave. But when visitors around his age from the living world arrive, the boy feels a spark of hope. As the visitors investigate a mystery of their own for a podcast, for a school project, the boy's long-buried memories begin to shake loose. He wonders if maybe they could help him uncover the dark secrets of his past in hopes of finding a way to finally evolve. Hollow Pines doesn't like visitors. And with a malevolent spirit lurking in the shadows and painful memories buried deep, and for good reason, the boy wonders if he'll ever find his way home or be stuck at Hollow Pines forever. You and your kids can love reading The Visitors by Greg Howard. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by Why Should I Climb This Tree by Ryan Hogan. Fantastic picture book. A young boy can't understand why climbing a tree would be any fun, or why it would be a good use of his time. His father, who's a veteran of climbing many trees, is determined to show his son why it matters. A story that's accessible to all ages, accompanied by wildly colorful and evocative illustrations. Why Should I Climb This Tree could be the antidote for the impediments delivered to our children from excessive use of digital screens and social media. Urging children to go outside and play, the climbing tree is a metaphor for life. The boy discovers much about his abilities and how connecting with nature can elicit feelings of confidence, positivity, and peace like nothing else can. Contemplating his journey to the top of the tree, giving him perspective on his own life and the world, is the final reward. Ryan really hopes that this book inspires families to put down their screens and reconnect with nature and each other. Why Should I Climb This Tree by Ryan Hogan. You're going to love it. Join us right now from beautiful Long Island in New York City. Our guest is here today to celebrate her brand new middle grade novel. Is called 12 to 22. Please welcome to the show, Jen Calanita. Hey, Jen, how are you?
How are you? Thank you so much for having me.
I'm delighted. It is a rainy day here in Boston. It's been raining for the last 24 hours, and I couldn't be happier because we need it.
We do here in New York, too. I am thrilled it's raining. It's actually great writing weather. So I've been looking forward to a rainy day for a while.
That's interesting that you say that. I haven't heard that for a long time, but I remember when I was young and trying to write short stories and whatnot, I would love rainy days because it would just, I don't know, is it the sound of the rain that kind of focuses you in?
I think it's the sound of the rain, and I think for me, it's less distractions because the call of the sun to me is always there, and I'd rather work outside if I could, but honestly, it's a little bit distracting. So, this is just a nice, perfect rainy day. I have my Chihuahua, Ben Kenobi, seated beside me, and we're getting a lot of work done today. So it's great.
Awesome. Well, I know that Ben would love to hear you tell us all about 12 to 22.
So 12 to 22 is about a girl who makes a wish on a TikTok filter to be the perfect age, which she has decided is 22 because, as we know, Taylor Swift says it's a great age to be. And she makes this wish and she winds up in her 22-year-old self's body. And she's got this amazing life, the one she kind of wanted to have at 12. She's working for the best influencer she knows on TikTok. She's got this amazing apartment in Boston. She has a fabulous closet full of clothes, but her life and her friendships and her family relationships are not what she thought they would be. And she needs to figure out who this new person is at 22. And is there any chance to get back to being 12 again and not skip this part of her life that was troubling her? So it's definitely, if you're familiar with the movie 13 Going on 30 with Jennifer Garner, it's a nod to that movie. It's one of my favorite movies. And I felt like if I was going to do a story with a little bit of magic where somebody's jumping forward in their life and time, it would make sense if the magic came from TikTok because kids are on TikTok a lot lately.
Well, there's so much to dig into there. First off, if she's living in Boston, she must be making a fortune because Boston's really expensive.
Yes. I mean, she's working at this incredible beauty company. It's funny. I really wanted to set it in Boston because I went to school in Boston, and those were some of my favorite years living in at college up there. And so I said to my editor, well, she'd never be able to afford New York rent. And she said, no, but she is also from Boston, my editor. And she was like, well, she's probably not going to be able to afford Boston either. But we figured if she had this incredible life now and she was a TikTok sensation herself, she probably could afford Boston in the future. So it's definitely like this aspirational thing. I couldn't afford Boston, at 22, but this character can with this fabulous life she somehow inherited.
Isn't it interesting? I remember my daughter was very much older, beyond her years. We always used to joke. We kind of fibbed and got her into dance school 2 years before she was supposed to be 4, and we got her in at like 2.5, and she just passed. So she always danced with older girls, and then when she was a teenager, older women, and she never had that 12, 13, she was never a 12 or 13-year-old girl. We always used to joke she was, she skipped it and she went to her 20s and 29 when she was 18. And that's a really challenging age for everyone, but especially for girls, because I lived through it with my niece, who I just moved into her college dorm. But she very much was a 13, 12, and 13, 14-year-old girl. It's a trying, difficult, challenging time.
Yes. And I have a 13-year-old myself. I have a boy, and I also have a 13-year-old goddaughter who this book is dedicated to. And, it's funny to see the different situations they're both in. And with a girl, just things she's dealing with that, my son doesn't even care about. Like, she'll say, so-and-so at school said to me this week, are those sneakers real or are those fakes? And my son's like, people care about what sneakers you have on, but he's a boy. He could roll out of bed and go to school. That's just the type of kid my kid is. But my niece, this really weighs on her when somebody is judging what she's wearing. If she hears somebody whispering when she's walking down the hall, unfortunately, I think, who you're friends with or who you think you should be friends with definitely plays into that mindset in middle school. And, having so many friends with girls in middle school and kids in middle school, like, it just, my heart breaks because it can be a very trying time if you get wrapped up in all that, or if you're somebody who internalizes a lot, which I definitely was. Mm-hmm. So I think that's another reason why I wanted to do a story set at this age, is because I still feel those emotions and remember those feelings so much. There's a group of girls in this book called the Cambridge Street Girls, and they're very loosely based on a group of girls who I was not friends with in high school, who I really had no problems with, but they were the aspirational group of girls. Like you wanted to be part of that group. And I just wasn't part of it. In my story, the girls are definitely mean to my main character. But in my own life, that wasn't the case. I just so wanted to be part of that group and I wasn't. And I kept thinking, what is it about me that I'm not cool enough to be one of these girls, or that I'm not wearing what they're wearing, that I can't afford to wear what they're wearing? It was like something that definitely weighed on me. And looking back, I kind of feel like I was a great kid. I had a great group of friends and it all worked out. But sometimes when you're in the thick of it at 12 or 13, you really feel like, oh, if I could just be friends with this person, if I could just have all these followers on TikTok, if I could just have this other life, everything in life would be okay. And that's not true at any age. And that's something my character in the story really has to figure out.
Mm-hmm. You know, you mentioned TikTok and social media. And one of the things that I feel really blessed that stuff wasn't around when I was a teenager. I would have had an awful lot of fun with it, but I'd be apologizing for so much stuff, so many of the dumb things that got recorded. But boy, it adds an awful lot of pressure to kids that are already feeling a lot of pressure and a lot of social pressure.
Yes. And the thing is, you know, being a parent myself and having a kid who's going to be a senior and a kid who's in 8th grade, you know, I get it. There's this push and pull there, there's part of you that's like, oh gosh, I wish you weren't online at all. And then there's another part that knows this is very much a part of their life now. And there are some things they really enjoy about social media, but there are also some scary rabbit holes you don't want them to fall down. And I do know when I go into mom mode and I not necessarily try to lecture, but I try to have a discussion. Like I say, Ed Sheeran said something the other day about how nobody posts a bad day on social media. Mm-hmm. And I was like, that's so true. And that's something I want my kids to know. And I want them to know Tom Holland took a break from social media because it was too much on him. But, you know, sometimes they'll say, oh, Mom, really? Mom, we know this. Mom, we know this. So what I feel like in my books is if I can touch on that without it feeling like a lecture, without it feeling like a parent trying to say, you know, social media is bad or this is what you have to watch out for. I think that's another way to get through to kids. And in both 12 to 22 and another book I had come out last year called The Retake, where social media really plays into that story too, just touching on the fact that you can't live your whole life online, that you can't always worry about how many likes you have or who's following you or who's commenting on your story. It's something very important that these kids need to know and they have to deal with that you and I didn't have to deal mm-hmm. with. You know, I always say to my kids, it was hard enough at 12 to find out on Monday morning that 3 girls had a sleepover Saturday night and I wasn't invited. I can't imagine being their age now and scrolling through Instagram or scrolling through Snapchat and seeing a huge group of girls hanging out without you and thinking, why wasn't I invited? Like mm-hmm. It's right there in the moment. It's so hard to get away from. So if I can just use these books to kind of show that everybody is feeling these things, that everybody deals with this at this age, and that, you know, you have to separate yourself from social media in some way, I feel like maybe I've done my job without lecturing them, without being too mothery.
Well, I mean, that's the beauty of story is that we can delve into these things and hopefully have conversations with our kids. And we don't want to lecture our kids because they're not going to listen to us.
No.
But they very well may listen to us if you know, we co-read 12 to 22 together and we're sitting at the dinner table or we're driving to soccer or ballet and, hey, what do you think about what happened in chapter 5 last night? And hey, mm-hmm. and that way we're kind of doing it sneaky.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the great thing about reading with your kids. I mean, I always have enjoyed getting to read with my kids, even as they got older, and reading the same book at the same time and discussing it because it just opened a door. It didn't feel like I was questioning them about their social media use. Like, you know, when you think of 12 to 22, I was talking about the character. Like, how do you think she felt when she saw everybody was wearing the same shirt together on social media in this post, and they were all having dinner together, and the character wasn't invited. How do you think she felt? And sometimes their own emotions will slip in, or that will segue into a story about something that happened that they noticed on social media, or that they noticed that their friends were doing on social media. So I feel like it's such a great opportunity when you read something like 12 to 22 together to open the door to that discussion about, how much time we spend online, getting so concerned about who likes this, who doesn't. When my niece learned that the book was dedicated to her, she was super excited. But the first thing she said to me was, "Do you think I'll get a Google page now?" And I said, "What?" And she said, "Well, do you think my name's going to pop up on Google? Like, I'll be like famous." And I was like, "Is that what it's really about? Or is it that this is cool? My aunt dedicated a book to me." So we talked about it a little bit, and I tried not to lecture, but they spend so much time online that they get so wrapped up in this world. Sometimes it can be really difficult. It can be really hard. So reading with your kids and having that opportunity to talk about somebody other than them being in a situation, I feel like is a great chance to have a discussion.
You brought back a memory. Back when my daughter was still a teenager and would tour around with me, and she was a very talented singer. One of her friends, she wanted to have one of her friends with us in one production of the show, and wanted to give her that chance and experience. And I know nothing about singing, so we brought in a talented coach, and he's working with both girls, and they're doing a wonderful job. And I'm just being very complimentary. And at one point, my daughter's friend turned to us and said, "Do you think I'm going to be famous?" And I remember looking at the coach, and I was really, and both of us were really disappointed. And and in my heart, I'm like, "Kid, you don't want to be famous. You do not want to be famous."
I mean, I've touched on this in, my first series I ever wrote. It was considered a young adult series. Now I think I would consider it middle grade, but it came out 17 years ago. It was called Secrets of My Hollywood Life. And it was about a character who had grown up on TV. She was kind of like one of the Olsen twins. She had been on a show like Full House, grown up in front of America, and now was a teenager and trying to navigate life in Hollywood. And this was pre-social media. And the book has, tabloid articles in the book in between chapters. And I thought that was the worst thing that could happen to a celebrity. I thought, like we were saying before, like things you say as a teenager or things you do sometimes, when you think it through later on, you're like, "Oh, why did I do that? Why did I say that?" And I thought it's got to be so hard to be a teen celebrity who is judged for every move they make, and it's printed. Well, now for our own kids who are not celebrities, it's the same thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, with a senior in high school, from the minute he got social media, it was a conversation we had to have where I was constantly pointing to the news and saying things like, "See, this person posted a picture of themselves, and now it's come back to bite them," or "They tweeted this 3 years ago. Somebody dug it up and now it's cost them a job." Like, just because something might disappear in 24 hours on Snapchat doesn't mean that it doesn't exist out there somewhere. Like, if you're going to live your life online, you've got to be thinking about what you're saying and you're doing and how you're presenting yourself at all times. Mm-hmm. And I don't think they realize that. They live so in the moment now with social media. They don't realize there's still a longevity to it too. This is never really going to go away. Yeah.
Well, I love when we talk about this with kids and you get the answer, "Well, that's not fair." And it's like, well, you're right, but that doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't matter. And you chose to put it out there. Mm-hmm. You chose to put it out there. And so you have to understand there's always, there could be ramifications from that. Yeah. So, because you just don't know how things are going to go. When the book before 12 to 22 came out, The Retake, which was about a girl who found a time travel app on her phone and used it to try to make up with her best friend, my youngest was like, "Mom, you should join TikTok because you can't go to bookstores, you can't go on a book tour, and how are you going to tell people about this book?" And so he said, "Why don't we do an unboxing video?" Because that's the thing now. Like box of books shows up and
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
the author unboxes them and sees it for the first time with the audience. And I said, well, okay, I'll join TikTok. And I had like 50 followers. And it was a Disney book was coming out that week first. And so I unboxed the video and my son was like, well, we'll set it to the Disney movie, which was Hercules. We'll set it to music from that. And I wound up having like 80,000 views and I gained like 3,000 followers. And it was such a weird feeling because I was starting to write 12 to 22 and I'm like, this is what it's all about. Mm-hmm. This is what the kids get so excited about. You're seeing those likes rack up and I'm like, this is kind of cool. I now have followers. At the same time, there's now a video of me in my bathrobe, not wearing makeup on the internet because when we filmed it, my son was like, you have no followers. No one will ever see it. But they did. And that's just it. That's the whole thing about social media. It's unpredictable mm-hmm. and you just never know what's going to happen.
Yeah. I'm remembering back, my son is 29 right now, and I remember when he was 13 or 14, he lost his phone, and so we had to get a new one, and we went in there, and the friendly person at the phone store said, well, this is going to, it's a smartphone, he gets to go online, and I go, well, I don't want that. And he said, well, everybody is going to have it. I goes, yeah, but I don't want it for my kid.
Yeah.
But the thing that was frustrating was they didn't have any phones that didn't connect to the internet. And I'm like, I'm a parent. I should have some say. We should have some choices here.
I know. I was the last mom. So my kids' elementary school went K to 6. Mm-hmm. And some middle schools start in 5th or 6th, but ours went to 6. So our rule, my husband and I, our rule was, well, you don't get a cell phone till middle school because really there's no need for it. Like we pick you up and we drop you off. You're really nowhere without us. And I want to say when my oldest started 6th grade, a lot of kids didn't have phones in 6th grade. That was the norm. He's now a senior. When my youngest, who's in 8th grade, started 6th grade, he was like the last kid in the grade to not have a phone. And he was like, Mom, the only one. But I just felt like once we opened Pandora's box and we had the phone, there was no coming back from it. Like, it was, everything was available to him at all times. So we had to put into place all these rules about, when you could have your phone, when the phone was taken away. No one's allowed their phones in bed at night. Like, like all these different rules we have where they're like, Mom, but you so are trying to keep them safe. Mm-hmm. And, that's it. This is a whole new era of parenting that no one had to deal with before. And I don't know, it makes me, that's another reason why I really like to include it in books is, if I can help in some way without hitting kids over the head with it, mm-hmm. All the good and the bad and the things you deal with online, that's, I don't know, that's important to me.
Yeah.
That's important to me.
And, as a parent, we're being asked to monitor something that we have no experience with. Right. It's like one thing, we have to teach our kids how to stay safe online. It's like, who's going to teach me how to stay safe online?
I know. And, when I wrote Secrets of My Hollywood Life, I remember the character, like, dealing with the fact, like, she was always trying to convey, just because somebody looks great on a red carpet doesn't mean that's how they look in real life. Like, that was the thing 17 years ago kids were dealing with. They'd see a picture of somebody like Miley Cyrus and they'd think, oh my gosh, they're gorgeous all the time. And then I would be at a photo shoot with that celebrity and I would see they look just like everybody else, before hair and makeup and designer clothes. Now it's a whole new ball game. Mm-hmm. And these kids are seeing, well, they all want to be Insta famous. They all feel like they could be an influencer. They all think, well, why do I, some of them, I hate to say it, will be like, well, why do I need school? I could sell stuff on TikTok. I could have enough followers and make money from every like. I could be an influencer. And I just think, is that really a job now? Like maybe for a very select few for this moment in time, but I want them to realize there's more out there. You mm-hmm. have to figure out who you are and where you belong in that world. And it's fine to spend some time online, but you have to spend time in the real world and you have to figure out who you are so you know where you're going next. Yeah. And that's what, Harper really has to figure out in 12 to 22. She thought if I jump all this hard stuff, if I jump being 12, if I jump all these hard years coming up and I'm 22, life will be great. And then she realizes it's not so great because she didn't figure out who she was before she made that leap.
Yeah.
So, they want to rush everything now. And I so want to say, don't rush it.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much good stuff happening right now. There's hard stuff too,
yeah.
but there's a lot of great stuff too.
Yeah.
And that I think is a great talking point for a parent and a kid to have when they're reading the book.
Yeah.
What was great about your life at 12? What were things you were dealing with at 12? What did you like? What did you not like? Where did you think you would be? Who did you think you'd be at 12? And how did it really work out? So I love those kind of conversations.
Yeah.
I try to have them with readers or with schools when I'm on school visits all the time because, I want them to know, like, I didn't know where my life was going to go at 12. And I even at 22, I wouldn't have told you I was going to become an author. That's not who I thought I was going to be. Mm-hmm. So life takes turns and you turn with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I love that. We encourage families all the time. Talk about yourself. Story is beautiful, and talking about stories and reading books together and talking about the stories you're reading together is such a wonderful thing. But you've lived a life, and your life is full of stories, and your kids would
right.
love to hear those stories.
Right.
Yeah.
They would.
Yeah.
They really would. They really would, because then they know you're just like them. Mm-hmm. You went through the same things. Maybe we didn't have social media, but we still had issues with other kids at school. We still, worried about what we were wearing, what we looked like in the hallway. I mean, I was telling my kids the other day, I remember, my dad was a U.S. postal worker and my mom worked part-time. And I remember we had $100 to buy fall school clothes. And even back then, I think that bought 3 things. Mm-hmm. And I had to be really, really sure what those 3 things would be. And some years it worked out and I liked what I bought. And some years I remember getting to school and thinking, oh, everyone has like a Benetton sweatshirt. And that would have been my whole $100 or more. And I wanted more than one thing. So that's not what I bought, but I wanted that sweatshirt so bad too. So they're like, oh, you were just like us. Like, just because we want the Air Jordans doesn't mean we get them. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean, like anybody's going to look at you any different in school because you don't have them. But, I'm like, I get it. I get it. So, it humanizes you when you open these discussions.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, when I was in high school, I had hair just as long as you.
That was the look.
That was the look. And I had it then. I don't have it now. Hey, Jen, where can people, this has been a lot of fun. Where can people go to find out more about you and find out more about 12 to 22?
So I have a website. It's jenkalanitaonline.com, and you can find me there. And, sadly, because it is the way it works today, like with their parents' permission, they can find me on TikTok and Instagram and on Twitter, where I'm always doing book giveaways. So I hope they will connect and say hi and tell me they listened to today's podcast. I would love that.
That would be awesome. We've had a really fun time talking to the author of 12 to 22, a great new middle grade novel from our guest, Jen Kalanita. Hey, Jen, thanks for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're kicking off Hispanic Heritage Month with a conversation with Denise Soler Cox. She is the filmmaker behind Being Enye. It's a really fascinating conversation. You don't want to miss it. Hey, if you're the author of a fantastic children's book, please be sure to visit readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the Authors Click Here button at the top of the page to find out how we can help you celebrate your book to the world. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our guest, Jen Kalanita. Please be sure to check out 12 to 22. Also want to thank our sponsors, Ryan Hogan. Be sure to check out Why Should I Climb This Tree? And Greg Howard, his book, The Visitors. It's going to really entertain you and your kids. I want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Marabella Q. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.